it's exciting to have Swiss wine because from a completely selfish perspective, it strikes a chord for me, but hopefully it strikes a chord for many others. And I often think that wine, whether you've actually been to the place or not, really good wine is a bit like a liquid postcard. It transports us vicariously to places we would love to go. These wines can transport us to this place that most of us really want to go to. And it's a world of shimmering blue sky, snow, and mountains, damn it.
Hi, today we're going to ask the question about, should Australians be envious about Swiss wines? I'm Trent, and we're on an unapologetically unprofessional, unfiltered wine journey. And we're saying here, drink more, try more, learn more. Now, when I think about Switzerland, I think about a few things. Cheese, chocolates, watches, maybe skiing as well.
Skiing, yes. Medical equipment.
But I don't really think about Swiss wines. So we're going to be a bit adventurous today. We're going to be a bit curious today and delve into the world of Swiss wines. We've got two people here to lead me on that journey. We've got Dan Sangermani, the founder of Invidia Wines, who imports Swiss wines, and I believe is the only person that imports Swiss wines into Australia.
At the moment, yes.
At the moment, yes.
Okay.
And he's not just going to import Swiss wines, but he's also trying to connect Swiss wine culture with Australian consumer. And also joining me is Ned Goodwin, Master of Wine, industry specialist, and is not only just going to tell us about what's in the glass, but he's also going to talk about culturally what it means in terms of these Swiss wines. And my job's quite easy. Be the curious drinker, asking the stupid questions about what are Swiss wines and why do we care. Thank you for joining us, gents.
No problem.
Pleasure, Trent.
Before we get started, we're always trying to break the ice. So there's some icebreaker questions. I'll start with you first, Dan. First question is, most memorable wine or most memorable wine moment?
Okay. It's not the easiest question for me, but I think my most memorable wine, it's one of the wines that actually we'll be trying later today. It's a Merlot from the Swiss-Italian wine region, that is Ticino, and it's Icaro. It's just really the one that started my relatively new wine journey. So that's probably my most memorable wine moment.
Fantastic. What's the last glass of wine that you had?
I actually had a Bullman Grenache Rosé last night at the wine bar at the International.
Oh, fantastic. With Ned?
You were back there, were you?
No, I've been back there, yes. No, with a friend that is studying for his WSET 4. So we caught up yesterday. And
I feel you love that place. It feels like you've been there multiple times.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Person, past or present, they'd love to have a bottle of wine with, and what bottle would you pick?
I think they would be my grandfather, because unfortunately he passed away while I was living in Australia and I didn't get the chance to say goodbye. And my parents basically, I don't know why, I let them convince me that I didn't need to go back for the funerals because there was literally nothing I could have done.
Yeah.
At that point. And so that's probably one of my regrets, considering that he's the one that initiated, got me to try my first sip of wine when I was 14, 15 years old.
And what bottle would you pick?
I'd probably, if I could go back, a bottle of White Merlot Minerva, which is a estate literally a couple of 100 meters beyond my house my parents' house in Switzerland, that now has ceased operation. And that was the first white Merlot I ever tasted.
Oh, wow. So, I've still yet to try my first white Merlot,
but your time will
come.
We'll
get that. Okay, next one. Ultimate or unexpected food and wine pairing?
For me, it's a paprika chips from Switzerland, which are very particular, and it doesn't matter what type of wine. I just love drinking wine with the paprika chips.
So they're better than our burger rings and twisties?
No. Paprika chips specifically, it's Zweifel, yes. Okay. I'm fairly picky about my chips.
Okay. Next one. Biggest lesson learned on your wine journey?
That to just take little steps and try not to rush. And at the end of the day, all it matters, it's whether you like the wine that it's in your glass, and especially you enjoy it with the people that you love the most, because without either of those two, you won't be able to enjoy it.
Next one. You lived many years on this earth already, I'm assuming. But if you could pick if you could treat your life as a vintage, which vintage would you pick and why?
I'll probably say 2007.
Yeah.
I was able to do a once-in-a-lifetime trip with 3 friends. We traveled through the west and the southern part of Africa over 4 months. That culminated in me being in Zimbabwe for 3 weeks, helping a friend that was doing his PhD there at the time. And I left a piece of heart in Africa, and I'll go back in a heartbeat if I could.
Amazing.
I can't wait for my kids to be able to be a little bit older and enjoy being out in nature, if that's ever going to happen, and take them there.
Okay, last one to wrap things up, but also tied to Swiss wines. What's the first Swiss wine that you've had?
It was the Minerva White Merlot from behind the house.
Hence the story to come full circle as well.
Yes, correct.
Among your many tattoos, Daniel, do you have white Merlot tattoos somewhere?
No, I just have the Swiss flag and the glass of wine, which is not colored in, so it can be white or red at your pleasure.
It's quite cute, the glass of wine on your
I just
thumb.
noticed the X-Men under that Wolverine and Iron Man on it.
And Magneto was the last one.
We're going to battle of the superheroes.
Yes, and obviously
I'm going to pop another one. If you were a superhero, which superhero would you be?
I think I'd love to be Scarlet Witch, although it's obviously...
I don't know that one.
Who's that?
You don't know? Wanda Maximoff. She's the most powerful of the, both, well, not X-Men because that's Jean Grey, but anyway, I'm not big in comic book history, but I think there's some question that she might be the daughter of Magneto, but Scarlet Witch, it's be my pick.
I've learned a bit about Ned already, but I do want to learn a bit more about you
Me
as
too.
well. What's your most memorable wine or most memorable wine moment?
Look, I steer away from the most memorable is different, I suppose, to favourite.
Correct, and that's why I use the term memorable.
I'll countenance that question.
Yeah.
Look, there are a bunch, but given it's so recent, bragging rights, I was at a dinner, a lunch, I should say, 2.5 weeks ago, and I drank the last remaining bottle of 1899 Romani Conti in the world. And because of the people at the table, and kudos, Daniel, for talking about how people articulate wine. It was the most memorable wine, at least in recent memory.
Wow.
Not necessarily because of the intrinsic qualities of a wine that was clearly very old, but because of the
food, the people, where
the
you were.
food was fine. I mean, it was very bourgeois French food. And, I'd had enough of that at that point in my trip. But the people at the table were fascinating. There was no one-upmanship. There was no the usual boring type of conversation that happens around fine wine gatherings. There was none of it.
Awesome.
A fascinating group of people with a beautiful centerpiece as that wine.
Fantastic.
So that was wonderful.
Next one. What's the last bottle of wine that you had?
2018, Francois Mikulski Meursault Premier Cru Porozo. Last night at a mate's birthday. And it was his.
That rolled off the tongue very well.
Well, just as... Actually, I haven't been drinking much. I've had nice stints of no alcohol, alcohol-free days, that is. And last night was a birthday party.
Not no and low
it
alcohol
wasn't
wines.
the case last night. No.
Okay, next one. Person, past or present, they'll love to have a bottle of wine with. And what bottle would you pick?
Look, I think Keith Richards would be a pretty fascinating individual to chat to.
Yeah.
And
what's a rock and
perhaps
roll wine?
appropriating a wine to his era, perhaps an old claret.
Yeah.
He might be a sort of radical character with many interesting things to say, but I think his drinking habits are probably quite conservative. So let's hark back to something from the halcyon era of halcyon era Rolling Stones is really the 70s for me. But I think if we go back to the very early Rolling Stones and talk about how and why he created the band with Mick, then something from, say, 66, Bordeaux, great vintage, often overlooked, hidden under the bushel of 61 perhaps, but, so why not?
Okay.
All of a sudden I feel very inadequate with my answers.
Well, actually, I don't drink Bordeaux really.
Ned does that to people.
I reckon if it was with him, it'd be a good wine to drink.
Next one. Ultimate or most unexpected food and wine pairing? Okay,
so I came back from one of my stints abroad.
Yes.
Opened up the cupboard at my parents' house and found an old bottle, a 1983 Jabelet Chevalier de Sterenberg Hermitage Blanc. And I remember it because it was one of the first wines I'd bought at auction as a curious young person just starting to dabble in wine. And I'd stored it there. and it was still there, lo and behold. I'd completely forgotten about it, and I pulled it out, and Dad had cured an ocean trout in a traditional way with quite a bit of dill and white Hermitage is mostly Marsan Blanc, and it just that sort of viscous, low acid texture of the Marsan, particularly with something that's with the ocean trout, which if paired with a white wine that's too acidic, can bring about that sort of metallic aluminum tinfoil taste that some people call fishy. It doesn't really work. But conversely, the Marsan was viscous, round, ripe, and it had that sort of, old dried straw, attractively oxidative mushrooming quality. And it was just one of those intuitive matches that went magically well.
Yeah.
So it was great.
I feel like everything's amazing. I thought it would be like KFC and Salon or something like that.
Well, that's good too. I was actually thinking about that. It's amazing. KFC, dirty old KFC with salubrious champagne. It's a pretty great mix. A pretty great match.
Next one could be a tricky one. Biggest lesson learned on your wine journey?
Well, there have just been so many.
Yeah.
And I suppose now delving further into middle age, it's, alcohol knocks you around. And there have been a few, I mean, as wonderful as wine is.
You're still 20s, aren't you?
I wish I was, but alas, I'm not.
Looks 20.
And there are these moments through particularly the early stages of middle age where you think you're still, 30 or 25 and you just write it off as fatigue or jet lag or whatever it might be. And of course, that is often the case, but the confluence of that, and I was certainly traveling a lot at that point in my life, but then tasting wine, and let's call it what it is, drinking wine professionally, constantly.
Yes.
And as disciplined as I am in terms of spitting and exercise and everything else in and around all of that, the reality is your body's absorbing a great deal more alcohol than the average person who's not working with it. And I had a few warning shots. And one was when I went to a tasting straight off a plane with a bunch of sommeliers working for a group to whom I was consulting. And I went in there and it was 10 a.m. I'd had maybe 3 tastes of wine, so I wasn't drunk. But I remember putting my hand on a table that was covered with about 50 bottles, a purveyor, and I almost took the entire table out. And I didn't, but that was the first warning shot. And I went back to the hotel room, missed the entire tasting, and woke up at 4:30 a.m. the next day. That's how obviously tired and everything else I was. But alcohol was all a part of it because I'd just come back from 2 weeks on the road talking about champagne. And then there were a couple of other moments like that. And some were self-inflicted and others weren't necessarily, but they were warning shots of, it's a beautiful thing, but one needs to tread deftly, carefully.
Respect and moderation.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. Next one. If you could bottle a moment in your life, what vintage would that be and why?
Yeah, look, it'd be 1989. And obviously I wasn't born in 1989. But it was such a seminal year in my life. And it's pertinent to what we're going to be talking about because that was the year I actually arrived in Switzerland. It was the first time I'd ever been to Europe. I was on the way to start school, and we'll talk about that later, in a small town, an alpine town called Lézin in the Valais. And I arrived in Europe as this young kid with, a great deal of curiosity, unblemished by any negative preconception simply because I'd never been there before. And I'm sure I was incredibly exuberant and very, very naive, but what a beautiful time in my life. And of course, it was as seminal because it was the year, perestroika, glasnost, the wall coming down. And it was also a year I spent after starting at the school in Switzerland. I then had a job that we were talking about earlier in Vienna. And I ended up spending the entire summer in Vienna. And as the walls of the Eastern Bloc came down, this university dorm that I was spending the summer at, while uni obviously was on a break, it was filled with all of these workers from Poland and Hungary, etc., doing menial jobs like working in ice creameries or butcheries. And there I was, working in fashion. But together we made a real motley crew, and I made a lot of great friends. And of course, these people had never seen an Australian before. I must have been quite quite exotic, but I'd never met an Eastern European before. So these, quite you sort of yeoman workers would trudge in carrying meat and ice cream and lots of liquor. They loved to drink. And so we had a lot of great nights together, and it was just, I wasn't cognizant of it at the time, but obviously 1989
by the moment,
from a Western perspective was such a seminal year in history, and there I was, sort of in the middle of it in my own way, and of course it was a pretty good vintage too for Bordeaux and Burgundy and so many other things.
Definitely,
yeah.
So was that where you had your first Swiss wine, or where was it?
It was not in Vienna, obviously, but in Switzerland, in the Valais.
Yeah,
and that's actually in many ways reflecting is where I first started really enjoying wine, because a lot of my peers there were Americans at the same school, and they tended to drink a lot of beer or hard liquor.
Yeah.
And while I don't mind a beer, I'm not a big beer drinker, and nor do I drink much hard liquor. And so I turned to wine. And of course, it was Swiss wine because that's where I was. It was fondant and Dole. We'll talk more about that, I'm sure. But truly, that's where I really started to drink a great deal of wine.
We should cut to your wine journey, Dan. What is the Dan Sangermani wine journey like? And how did it lead to where you are now importing Swiss wines? I think 10 months in, you mentioned as well.
Well, my wine journey really only started 2.5 years ago when I went back to Switzerland, and I was taken out to a restaurant by a friend that actually spent a few weeks here in Brisbane the year before learning English. And he saw this wine on the wine list, and he said, "Oh yes, you have to absolutely try that." And that was the bottle of Icaro. He told me the story of the winemaker that sadly passed away in 2022. And that wine really hit me. I don't know if it was the story at the same time as you taste the wine, but it really gave me goosebumps, which, show that there we go.
Yes.
I'm getting them again. Yes, I'm very empathic, and I relieve every sensation just by remembering. Anyway, so that's when I decided to take home a few bottles, and this lovely man that runs a beautiful wine bar in Camp Hill in Brisbane. He organizes a lot of master classes, a lot of Italy versus France and various tastings. And at one of those, he was wearing a T-shirt, "I hate Merlot." And obviously reference, the movie Sideways quite often, and he hasn't found a Merlot that he enjoys. And so I took it upon myself to change his mind. And so I gifted him a bottle of Icaro.
Yeah.
And not only enjoyed it, but ended up putting the empty bottle outside his front window of the wine bar. And so I think that's a good testament that it was a good wine. And so I thought, well, if I can change someone's mind like that, why not trying to bring more aspects of my home, my upbringing, and my country of origin for other people to enjoy? I'm not necessarily looking to change everybody's mind about Swiss wines, but they're fairly unknown. And so, I just wanted to show that it was just more than just a novelty act, so to speak.
But you had a varied history already, right? You were was a reptile hunter, you were a photographer, but then when did that kind of switch towards wine? Did you had a love for wine right from the early days, or was it only more recent?
No, it just really started 2.5 years ago. It's just really, really, just a baby in absolutely baby form, because I'm super young in my journey. There's still a lot that I need to learn. Don't ask me to comment on which flavors or which there are in wines, because I'm not quite there yet. But it was just part of my upbringing and part of the culture and the history. So it's nothing that you feel it's a journey that starts. I think it just was fairly, low ranking in my life. And then all of a sudden it just took a, hyperbolic trajectory 2.5 years ago.
So is your crusade around getting everyone to try Swiss wines, or is it about changing those T-shirts from "I hate Merlot" or "I effing hate Merlot" to "I love Merlot"?
Absolutely. No, I think that Swiss wines are fairly unknown outside of Switzerland. There's a lot of people that refer to Switzerland as the Noah's Ark of wines, because we have 320 different varieties, 220 of which are either hybrids or peewee varieties. There's about 40 to 50 varieties that are indigenous that only exist in Switzerland, and then the rest is just international varieties. But it's something that most people are not aware, but we have a history that started way before the Middle Ages with winemaking and in Switzerland. And so most people are not aware, but we are drinking 250 million bottles while only producing 130 million. So we drink pretty much everything that we grow and produce, plus more.
Oh, wow.
We're insatiable.
Before we delve into Swiss wine specifically, we want to talk about the name Invidia as well. I'm assuming it's not like the computer chips.
No,
but it's
there's an I in front of the N. Yes, that I. Yes, a couple of years ago, that I didn't save me. I got served with papers, cease and desist, because I was doing photography at that time in fashion, and I tried to register the name, and it was too close between Photoshop and graphic design and photography to obviously what they do with the chips. And so the day before the end of the grace period, I got hit with a letter from their lawyers. Anyway, but it's just a Italian word, saying that I'm originally from the Swiss Italian part of Switzerland. That means envy.
And why should people be envious of Swiss wines?
Well, we are the country with the highest density of varieties per cultivated hectares in the world, and we produce a lot of very unique varieties that do not exist anywhere else. So they should be envy. No,
cool. We'll delve into that a bit later, but I just want to talk about Switzerland in general. You mentioned about Switzerland. What's your knowledge of Switzerland? I didn't know whether you've been there, but obviously you have.
Yeah. I lived there for about 2.5 years, actually.
Which parts?
In the Valais, so French-speaking part.
Yeah.
But I recall vividly, in fact, it was one of the strongest first impressions I had of that particular part of Switzerland was the terrace vineyards on the sort of gently undulating hillsides along Lake Geneva. And I know today, back then I just assumed, I just drank the wine. I didn't inquire too much about it, but I know today, of course, most of those vineyards are planted to Chasselas, which is the grape responsible for Fondant, the branded wine there. So,
and the register is a UNESCO World Heritage.
Oh, really? Yeah. So it's, I was struck by the pervasive vineyard culture, very much visible all around the area that I lived in, which was the town itself was called Leysin, Leysin.
Yeah.
So it's up the hill basically from Montreux, where the jazz festival is, and it was vineyards everywhere.
Yeah. But what is Swiss wine culture? I think we know what Australian wine culture is, or Australian drinking culture is.
Oh, right.
What's Swiss wine culture though?
Well, as a 19-year-old kid experiencing this, the one thing I noticed is people intuitively, at least this was the 80s, before Australians intuitively, they might now, but back then the Swiss intuitively would have wine at pretty much lunch and dinner table, whereas in the 80s in Australia that wasn't necessarily the case. Some people had wine at the dinner and lunch table, but not everyone. And so it struck me as very much an integral part of daily life, far more than it was back then in Australia.
I think for me, I was mentioning to Dan that I recently went to Zurich, which is, I think, my second time to Switzerland. The first time was Lake Geneva, and we did all the touristy things. We went to the Lindt factory, had chocolates there. The kids loved it. We also went to have cheese fondue, which we couldn't finish the pot. I think at Churchy, I think it was in the old town.
Oh, yeah.
So we had that, and that's all I knew about Switzerland. But it's the most beautiful town in Zurich as well. But big part of that was understanding how does food and wine connect. Maybe Dan, you go off.
Well, I think in Switzerland, because the winemaking is predominantly done by small family artisanal growers, there's a certain refinement in the way that they make wine that it's a perfect complement with food. So we don't produce any wine that it's overly oaked or too strong. Even if they have a high alcoholic percentage, they don't overpower once you drink them. And so they make the perfect wine pairing wines.
Are there certain examples you can provide?
Well, fondant with fondue or raclette.
Okay.
That's, So
is that the traditional pairing, is it?
Yes.
Oh, so I was doing it right.
Yeah.
Without
you were doing absolutely right.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So pretty much anywhere in the world you go and have fondue, you drink fondant. it is it's not overpowering. It's mild, it's delicate, and it's just a perfect pairing for cheeses in general. So here we have a 2024.
We're going to talk about
Riesling.
Swiss wines
so
now. Maybe we just kick off with
one of
the first one.
Those varieties that have been in recent years saved from extinction. There's only 20 hectares. It is predominantly cultivated in Switzerland, in the northern part, near the southern Germany. And out of the 20 hectares, 12 are found in the Zurich region. And Alain Schwarzenbach, which is the producer, is actually because of him that this variety of grape has been saved from extinction.
Okay.
And is it a hybrid?
No, it's just a
Riesling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Riesling.
So I'm going to ask the professional now. How should we interpret this wine? What are your impressions of this wine?
I mean, aromas sort of redolent of what I call, orchard fruits. Sort of apricot. Stone fruits, apricot, peach. But then there's this sort of racy, almost salty acidity about the wine. Maybe not this. It's sort of like a ripe, softer version of Riesling, without all of the citrus elements of Riesling.
Yeah,
it's more,
less zing,
more stone fruit,
more hum.
and quite round on the attack, and then that sort of salty acidity kicks into gear. But it's certainly a versatile wine at the table, surely.
It is, yes. This is done with malolactic fermentation. Some of the other wines in Switzerland do not.
Wow.
So I'm not sure what it would add or...
well, if it's done with malolactic acidity, one could deduce that the acidity must be pretty ferocious if there was no malolactic.
No, it has been with malolactic.
That's what I mean. But if it wasn't malolactic,
there would
ferocious.
Be off the charts, yes.
Because if that softened the acidity, which is what malolactic does, of course, then there's still plenty of acid there. Maybe that's why they put that through mallow, because of the fierce nature of the acidity.
So bring it to Australian context, you say this is very kind of Riesling-like as well. So is it like an oyster type of wine?
Yeah, I would say too. Shellfish, delicate fish, not something too rich, in my opinion. It can just be a good aperitif wine as well on his own, I think.
Okay. So deep dive into Swiss wines, I guess. To keep it really short, because people these days have really kind of short attention span.
Yeah, I'm one of them. So,
what's 3 words that would sum up Swiss wines?
There's 3 main words that comes to my mind. It's environment, social aspect, and economics. If I have to,
can you elaborate on why?
I can. Well, so pretty much every Swiss winemaker operates with those 3 words in mind. So, for the social, we have fair work conditions. And involvement of all the town, the community, and basically the area. So usually the whole village goes and help doing the harvesting. There's a really short supply chain. So the grapes, as soon as they harvested, they go into production straight away. And that's based on the economic factor. There's a great respect for nature, for the soil, for the water, and for what you give to, or what you're planning to give to the next generation. So all of that, it's, greatly preserved. And then for the environment, there's really conscious effort to increase the biodiversity and maintain ancient grapes that otherwise would disappear. The good thing about Switzerland is that by not joining the EU in the 1980s, they haven't been forced to adhere to the strict reorganization of the vineyards, where the little known variety were pulled out in favor of the most international and economically advantageous varieties. And then obviously a really effort to increase sustainability and decrease the use of pesticide, which is shown by the 220 plus varieties of peawees and hybrids that Switzerland grows.
And you, Ned, is there 3 words that sums up Swiss wines?
Mountains. Expensive.
Yes.
But does quality has a price?
Yeah. Well, but I mean, Switzerland's a rich
No,
country.
of
I
course.
think
Yeah.
generally
Yeah.
the world perceives Switzerland as expensive. So
Yes. Oh, it definitely is.
Unknown.
Unknown, yeah. Good one.
I mean, that said, I suppose if anyone thought about it a bit more than perhaps what the average Australian does, it's surely pretty obvious that Switzerland must have a wine culture, because obviously
It's a crossroad between
exactly
Germany,
the heritage
Italy,
is such that there are Italian speakers, German speakers, and French speakers, and then there's Romansh as well, which is an unusual language. But I mean, small country, but strong underlying wine cultures mingling with each other, really, as one. So,
well, why do you think that's the case? I think only like 1% gets exported, right? Because Swiss people are consuming
I think
a
we
lot.
are 2%
2%
now, but
still minimal, right? But
Very
why
minimal.
is that the case, though? Is it because they're trying to keep it all to
We
themselves?
just love our wines, and we, everything is so rooted locally with the history and the culture of each village where all the local vineyards are, that there's very little that is left over, even if they wanted to export it, even if there was a conscious effort to export it, there's not enough that it's made.
So would you say it is a hidden gem, though?
I would consider that for sure.
Certain wines, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I've tasted some very good wines from Switzerland, but they're hard to find. I think, I think Andrew Gard may have been importing one Pinot Noir producer for a while, a Swiss Pinot Noir producer.
Yeah. And Brix Wines used to have brings in Henry Boudou, the Chasselas.
Okay.
But I think last time I spoke with them, I was told that they stopped 5 years ago.
I see.
Are they trying to push exports around Swiss wines, or are they still trying to keep to themselves?
Recently there has been a little bit more, obviously, with the general trend, worldwide trend of people revising their the amount of wine that it's drunk. Obviously, that's an avenue that Swiss wine producers can try and explore.
Yeah.
But if you look at 98% of the websites, there's no English even on any of the websites. It's only French,
there's
Italian,
Google Translate, though.
German. Yes, correct.
That's
But that means that there's no really a significant effort, because obviously they don't want to appeal. There's no effort to appeal to a foreign or an international clientele. Otherwise, they would,
So to push the exports, though, I'm assuming they're not drinking less. So are they producing more, and then does that come at the cost of quality?
No. So to give you an idea, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but Switzerland is home of about 2,500 winemakers, and there's only 5 that produce more than 1 million bottles a year. So that accounts for about 20% of the total production, 2025, compared to Australia, which I think there's 40 producers, also out of about 2,500 producers in total, that account for 75% of the total production in Australia. So you see there already, how many. So on average, a Swiss winemaker makes between 50 and 70,000 bottles, but there's no monovarietal where they just grow one variety. So they all produce between 6 and 10 different varieties, which means that there's only about 10 or 12,000 bottles for each available on the market. And once those are drunk, there's just none left to go anywhere.
Yeah. I guess just kind of delve more into that question. It's like, why do you think people don't know about Swiss wines?
Because they're not available to purchase outside of the country.
Yeah, because think about we know Switzerland about, Swiss watches, and, they're very expensive as well.
Yeah.
And then, Swiss chocolates as well. But it seems like wine is always under the radar. Is there a good kind of rationale? Is it just because you can't purchase it?
It's just you can't, even if you want it, you just can't get it. Or it's just overly expensive and it's not worthwhile. There's also, it's not a disconnect, but it's very hard to try and introduce an unknown variety that people have not heard of, like Petit Alvin or Chasselas or Human Rouge, just to name a couple on top of my head, from a country that is not a known country for wine production. And so I try to bring in some of those, but also try to show that the other wines from universal varieties like a Chardonnay or a Merlot or a Sauv Blanc just are a true expression of the terroirs. And Switzerland is so varied. I mean, it's so fragmented, the micro terroirs that a certain plant can grow in a spot, and then it's just so nestled within the mountains that it can't grow, it doesn't spread, and basically it's not found anywhere else.
On that terroir one, let's go to the next wine. So this is what is this one?
So that's a Bianco Riserva. It's 100% Chardonnay from Ticino.
So how should we look at this Chardonnay? I'm guessing we shouldn't be looking at like a Margaret River Chardonnay.
I think it's probably comparable with a white Burgundy, in my opinion. Obviously, Burgundy is still relatively close to Switzerland on the other side of the Jura.
Just feeding off that comment, what's your thoughts about that? Is it comparable to Burgundy Chardonnay, or what's the differences that we should be looking at?
That's a good question. I certainly think it's quintessentially old world. I mean, that's painting the world with two broad brushstrokes, which is a bit of a cliche and increasingly nebulous as the lines are blurred. But the wine's got flavor, but it's also got phenolics, which I quite like, and it's quite subtle. It's got a kick of alcohol on the back end, but other than that, I think it's certainly far more Burgundian. If one had to make that comparison, then it would ever be close to anything from the New World. It's quite peppery almost too. I like it.
Yeah. Is there such thing as like an iconically Swiss wine? If you tasted this, would you go and taste that Switzerland?
There isn't, unfortunately. I mean, I don't think that it does, because we have 6 completely different wine regions in Switzerland. And you could say that there is a typical wine that it's in majority grown in in each of the specific regions, but there's not one wine that can sort of define the whole country wine history.
So you describe Switzerland looks like a pig, right?
Yes. I like to say that it's sort of like a piggy, where the snout, it's east towards Austria and Liechtenstein. The front leg, it's Ticino, which is where I come from, which is also the only part of Switzerland south of the Alps. And then there's Valais, which is the back leg. And Vaud and Geneva, it's the tail. So these 2 regions are just nestled around Lake Geneva. And then if you just go a little bit up north, still in the western side, it's the 3 lakes on the other side of the Jura mountain. And then basically it's very scattered, but they just decided to put all the German areas, which is the remaining 2/3 of the land, as a German area. And so that's Müller-Thurgau there. And in Ticino, it's Merlot.
Okay, so
that covers 80% of
the
production.
So there's regionality. So how should we kind of look at them? Is it one is Chasselet, one is Merlot,
so Vaud, it's Chasselas. 3 Lakes, it's Pinot. There's a bit of Savagnin, but Pinot Noir. So, and Müller-Thurgau in the north, and Merlot in Ticino. So those are also, apart Gamay as well, but the big 4 in terms of varieties in Switzerland, it's Gamay, Chasselas, Merlot, and Pinot Noir.
Okay.
Those are the top 4 varieties.
Okay. On this Chardonnay, for the people playing at home, what do you kind of smell? What do you taste? What do you feel with this one?
Again, orchard fruit, malolactic is subtle, so there's a bit of a sort of creamy aspect to the wine. And then the finish for me is almost peppery, which is quite intriguing and unusual but in the best sense, really delicious.
Is there anything in Australia that is similar to this?
No, not really. No, for me, this is far more, I mean, again, it's a feat to make these comparisons, but inevitably, given that it's the proverbial benchmark for pretty much every Chardonnay producer in the world, it's far more Burgundian than most Australian Chardonnays tend to be. So if some budding wine student said to me, oh, that tastes like, Burgundy or the Jura or something like that, I would think they're sort of on the right path.
I was sharing some of this wine with a couple of sommeliers yesterday, and they all told me that if they had that in the blind tasting for one of their exams, they'd be in trouble because it's not your typical, Chardonnay in terms of flavors and notes.
Talking about, I guess, Swiss wine's been recognised. One of the methods, I talk about industry, there's the award shows, there's, decanter, etc. like that. Are they prevalent in those type of award shows or magazines, or where do you see it at the moment?
I mean, in Switzerland, we have a couple of wine shows. Vinea, it's the most famous one, which happens on Lake Zurich, where the wines, instead of having like a big pavilion, there's like 20 or 30 boats all next to each other on the side of the lake, and then people just goes from boat to boat to actually taste all the wines. And it's more of a spectacle in terms of showcasing the best of what Switzerland has to offer. It's still used a little bit in the advertising, but most of the big and renowned winemakers don't need to necessarily go there, or they just go every couple of years just to show that they still, they're still in the game, so to speak.
What's your view, Ned? Like, I don't think I've ever seen in the magazine like the top 10 or top 100 being a Swiss wine. Maybe top 10, definitely not no Swiss wine.
No. I mean, it really goes back to that point about everything being consumed domestically. Yeah. I was just thinking there while you were speaking, Daniel. I mean, maybe we can draw the comparison with Austria. Austria hell bent on export, and yet they're also a pretty small country, topographically probably not so dissimilar to Switzerland, and yet obviously their varieties are different largely, but they're hell bent on export. Switzerland consumes domestically.
Not that it doesn't.
And so
care.
maybe that's one reason they're not pushing their wines across wine shows and all of these PR exercises. Yeah. Because we were talking earlier about wine shows only being as good really as the people judging, but effectively it's a PR exercise and a positive one for a lot of wineries. So if the Swiss for the most part anyway are not that concerned about exporting, why bother?
Yes. Well, I have to say though, over the last 2 years, there's been a much more conscious effort. So Swiss Wine, which is the federation, the federal organism that looks after the marketing and the education of wine and wine variety and history in Switzerland, has started organizing a couple of Swiss Wine Weeks where 30, 40, 50 different growers from Switzerland are present in London, so Swiss Wine Week London. There's been 2 Swiss Wine Weeks in Singapore. So Singapore is one of the very few countries where the consumption of wine actually has increased over the last few years rather than stalled or decreased. And because of the free trade agreement between India and Switzerland late last year, now they're targeting India as a up-and-coming potential market for export.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to show that there could be interest in Australia to sort of add Australia to the list. And in the future, if not next year, maybe the year after, trying to organize a Swiss Wine Week across Brisbane, Melbourne and Sydney, for example.
I'm just thinking from the consumer's perspective. You probably know this, Ned, like people don't like new things. People get scared of different areas that they haven't heard about. Sure. I'm hearing about, Chasselet, all these other areas I never heard about before. How do we kind of break down those boundaries, and how do you think the strain market's going to take towards Swiss wines?
Personally, I think that a lot of the wine market in the future is going to be pushed by a much younger demographic than has been in the past. And I feel, and obviously Ned has more experience, first-hand experience with that than me, but I feel like, at least in Brisbane, I see many more younger people, between 20 and 30 that are a bit more adventurous. They really want to try something that they haven't tried before. And even when I go around and do tastings, the sommeliers always are very keen because they get to try something that they haven't experienced before in their lifetime, unless they travel to Switzerland specifically. So it sort of breaks a little bit from the monotony and always have the same varieties. And I feel like the younger generations would definitely push the market towards a bit more strange and unique varieties compared to the older one that it's, a leopard doesn't lose his spots, kind of things where, they stuck with the, what they like, the Shiraz, the big woody wines. And that's my view, obviously. I don't know.
What's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that old guard who still drink that sort of stuff. But I mean, to Trent's point, most people are risk averse. They're afraid of the new. Positively, I think vast majority of consumers probably have an inbuilt trust mechanism when it comes to Switzerland. I mean, Switzerland's perceived as a trustworthy place.
Yes, correct.
You know, I mean, banking, expensive watches,
Yeah.
things are pretty polished and slick. The cuckoo clock.
Yeah. Pocket knives.
Yeah, pocket knives. So if trust alone
Biotechnology.
is a badge of confidence,
Roger Federer.
then there you go. Well, actually, surprisingly flamboyant compared to the stereotype perhaps he was. But yeah, look, if trust alone is a badge of confidence, then Switzerland has it in spades. So in that respect, I think people are probably going to be, quite confident in trying a Swiss wine. But I mean, I was reading I mean, one of the most expensive Pinot Noirs in the world right now in the secondary market is Japanese. So there's this huge fetishization of things Japanese, and it's parlaying into wine. That's happening particularly in Singapore and other Asian markets. And if I said that to the average Australian Shiraz drinker, they'd fall off their chair. So there you go. Who would have thunk it?
I still want to build on that point about connecting towards consumer. I think restaurants and somms have a big part to play in it.
Yeah, totally.
How do you think they'll take towards Swiss wines, and how would they kind of introduce this into the consumer?
I think, well, for example, you tested a 9-year-old Marsanne before. So apart the Hermitage that comes from, the Rhone area or the Tapnik here in Australia, there's not many monovarietal Marsanne on the market. And especially when it's aged, close to 10 years, unless you get to the, museum grade Tapnik or the big Rhone ones, that comes in at, 130 to 150 LUC, the Swiss one provides a similar experience, but at half the price. And so I think for a somm that, it's greatly placed in the market for a somm to be excited and want to present that.
What are your thoughts, Ned?
Look, I think somms are always curious about the new, the polar opposite of the regular consumer. And yeah, I mean, there's definitely a fashionability in and around mountain wines. I mean, a lot of American wine lists, particularly in New York, which for me is a barometer of what happens everywhere else. Eventually, Australia is probably about 10 years behind, usually. But there are categories now, mountain wines. So probably incited by the popularity of the Jura. And then came other things, and Petit Arvin, for example, is always on there from various alpine parts of Italy, and I mean, basically, it's nudging the border of Switzerland. I think as long as the sommelier is knowledgeable enough to cross-reference Italy, Austria, Switzerland, some of the shared varieties across the three, and not all, but some cases, then I think it's pretty easy pathway into getting it into glasses, which of course is the most important thing for all of us when it comes to wine. That's what we do.
We want to see in the glass.
Yeah, inadvertently or otherwise,
And a big part of that is also changing those preconceived ideas. And one of them is Merlot. So which is a good segue into the Merlot here.
But Trent, I don't think, Daniel and I were having this conversation the other day. I don't think Australians are, prejudice against Merlot as extremely as Americans are.
Oh, no.
I mean, the sideways factor was more of an American thing than it was.
I was really surprised when I was doing a bit of research before importing the wines and found out that Merlot is the third most crushed by volume of red grapes in Australia at 8%, behind obviously the 80% that it's Shiraz and Cab
It's probably going into blends though. There are not too many straight Merlots.
Yeah. So I think that, and then the fact that obviously when the first trees were imported from France, they got in the one from the left side of the left bank.
So Saint-Emilion Pomerol's the right bank.
Yes. Correct.
Yeah.
So what's this one? What's this Merlot?
Right on.
So this is a Vindala, so it's a Merlot blend from Ticino. It's a blend of Marcellan, Merlot, and Calminoir. There you go. This producer actually does this wine growing and winemaker does produce pure Marcellan as well, monovarietal Marcellan, which I have at home, but I couldn't bring 70 bottles of wine to Sydney.
So just back on the point, what do you think Australia's relationship with Merlot is? Do you think the whole I don't like Merlot is more of an American thing compared to Australian
so.
thing?
I think the relationship with Merlot here is not. There is no real relationship. I don't think there's ever been a star Merlot or a large volume, supermarket aisle type Merlot-centric brand that has brought the average Joe Blow to Merlot.
Yeah.
But there's been no negative factor or factors around Merlot.
Why do you think there's not much straight Merlot then?
Well, look, all the straight Merlot I had from Australia has basically been crap. So maybe that's why. Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's my experience.
Yeah. Which is one of the reasons why Merlot was one of my first, obviously coming from an area that, produces 80% of the production of wine production in the area. It's Merlot and Merlot based. So we do rosé out of Merlot, we do white Merlots. And, we've been the first, and a couple of people copied us, but there's no any really other commercial grade white Merlot available out there for purchase other than Swiss Merlot, Swiss white Merlot.
So let's compare the Merlots today. So what's the second Merlot that you have? The second Merlot,
it's a Icaro, so it's a blend of 90% Merlot and then 10% again Caminoir and Cafran in this case.
Okay.
Also want to point out that it's one of only 25 bottles remaining in the whole world.
Yeah, so what's the story behind this wine?
It's a pretty sad story. So this particular winemaker started taking over the family production of what used to be a fairly crude wine back in 2001. And although since he was a very little boy, he always loved to fly and, he wanted to be a pilot, he ended up making a profession out of it. So he was one of the top pilots in the region, and he was a specialist for dropping construction equipment or maintenance for the high tension big electric in the mountains. And unfortunately in 2022 due to a human error of his colleague, the helicopter crashed into high tension cable and exploded in the air, and unfortunately neither of them made it. And that was the last year that the wine was produced. And it was a really small family, 6 people production chain where everything was hand harvested, hand pressed. The corking process, there was no machinery, it was still all done by hand with the hand press, the labeling, and there was only 3 cuvées produced and only about 1,000 bottles every year. And in 2023, this particular, I know that Ned is going to roll his eyes, but this particular cuvée won over 3 different vintages, so 2018, 2019, and 2020. He won 3 gold medals at the World Merlot Championships. And because of that unusual achievement, he was also given the Grand Prix as the Grand Maestro Prix, which was dedicated, well, it usually gets given to the best Merlot producer in the world. And although some of the most renowned were not there, it doesn't take away that it was the best wine across 450 entries. Unfortunately, it was not there to get that kind of recognition because he passed away 6 months prior. And there's a bit of maybe forecasting, which is also sad and a bit ironic, that his flagship is called Icaro, which, traced the parallel with Icarus that flew too close to the sun and, whose wings then burned and it crashed back. And that's what ended up happening pretty much to him. So that's why it's very, again,
last of his legacy.
It's very, yes, it is definitely a ghost legacy. Yeah.
So it was, say, 24 bottles left, is it, in the world? Wow.
And sorry, Daniel, is that a 21 as well? This is the Vindala is a 21?
Yeah,
and so this Icarus is a 21 as well.
Which was the last year of production.
Yep. Okay.
So what enjoy one of the 25 list.
I know. So what is Swiss Merlot? How would you describe it? How is it different?
I would describe it as the best Merlot in the world, but obviously I'm biased because I grew up around it. But for me it is, I don't know, it's comfort, it's richness without overpower, it's, good structure. It doesn't feel like a 15% wine to me. And I don't know, I just, it's a soft spot in my heart. And initially, when I first started, I thought to just bring wines from my own region, but then I was able to go and I was invited by Swiss Wine to a tasting that had about 150 different Swiss growers and producers last August, and I got to try wines from all the other regions, and that was the first time that really I was I had access to that huge variety, and that really hit me like a ton of brick. Oh my God, all of these wines are absolutely exceptional. I can't possibly, regardless of my bias, just concentrate on wine from Ticino. And if I want to represent Switzerland, I have to represent all of the regions. And so that's why I expanded. And yes, I can.
Do you have a Switzerland tattoo on your arm as well, or not you?
Yes.
Oh, there is a thumb.
Yes.
It must be, right, if you're representing it. So for the people playing home again, Ned, Merlot, what do you see in the two glasses? How they're different? How would you express them? How they're different towards Australian Merlot?
Yeah, and Australian Merlot is sort of often a bit cranky, very stringy, astringent. Maybe people aren't paying the same sort of time, attention, conferring the same sort of love to Merlot as a straight expression, because it's largely not. So here, while these are not 100% Merlot either, as we spoke about earlier, this is Marcelin and Carmen Noir, and this is Carmen Noir and Cabernet Franc, right?
Only 10%,
majority, Merlot. But I like the wine on the left. The color, they're both 21s. I don't pay a great deal of it to color unless a wine is clearly very old or rooted, as Australians would say. But that color for me is a bit bricky around the edges for a wine that's not particularly old. Whereas this color is far more brilliant. I like the nose on the wine. It's obviously there's a cedar wood element, lots of plum, round, nice, plum. Almost Bordelais-like tannin. Very different tannins to what we find in Australia, with some exceptions from Margaret River. But Margaret River's wines would be far more bold, bolder than this.
So the Icaro spent 36 months in oak, which I don't think it's that predominant compared to 36 months in oak for the same style of wine that you have.
That's very ambitious, because frankly, no one puts their wine in oak for 36 months anymore, not even the Bordelais. So he's obviously out to make a fairly ambitious, aspirational is perhaps a better word, style of wine. 36 months, that's a long time.
Considering that he was, but not saying amateur, but he was, it wasn't his first trade, and he's never really went to wine school. He completely self-taught. I feel like it's an exceptional wine.
But no, the wines are distinctly European of style, and
the left is a bit more resolved.
A
bit more kind of earthy as well. The right one, I actually smelt it. It's like kind of more roll up. On the right, but
absolutely. One has a bit more acidity than the other one.
Sour, sort of fading, and quite drying because of all that oak. And the acidity is very, very high. I'm wondering how natural that acid is for what it's worth. Whereas the other wine is far more composed. It's good. Composed meaning balance, and you want to drink a second glass rather than a sip.
So I'm going to think from, again, the consumer's perspective now. Like, what do you think will surprise me the most about Swiss wines?
Consumer-wise, I think so. Switzerland. I asked someone that I met in Zurich to give me a quote. This person is one of the world's most renowned grape geneticists, Dr. Jose Guillamot, which is originally from Valais as well. And he says that Switzerland produces the most expensive cheap wines and the cheapest expensive wines. And I think that sums it up pretty well.
A nice dichotomy for us all to get our head around.
Of course.
Yeah, right.
So is there like a sweet spot? Like, we're talking about price, right? But we're kind of like dancing around it. Like, what is the price that we're looking for around Swiss wines?
It's hard for me to tell because I'm an importer and wholesaler, so I don't set retail prices. So I would say it ranges from the low 40s to the 130 to 150 range LUC, the average being around the 70s. So landed unit cost.
Okay, so by the time anyone drinks a decent Swiss wine on a wine list, it's probably going to be
2 to 2.5 times
over $200.
Yeah.
And for somebody hypothetically buying in a retail store, it'll be...
Oh, that's usually not quite as much.
no, of course not.
Yeah.
So that'll probably be around, the average would be around, the 100, 110, 120 mark for the average one.
Yeah.
It's a rare wine, hardly seen outside of Switzerland.
Yeah.
It's still done in, we have what we call heroic winemaking, because if you think that some of the slopes, especially in Valais, they can reach 90 degrees of slope.
Yeah.
And you have 1 or 2 rows of vines in between a rock wall and a rock wall. So you take one wrong step and, you're not going to make it when we're talking 500 or 600 meters above the level of the sea. And so it's,
so you're talking vertiginous vineyards?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And so, all of that, plus obviously the cost of labor in Switzerland, it is truly a premium wine. So, I think it's going to be a middle class and above kind of.
I know the feeling. Having been to Switzerland, it feels like everything's premium there.
Fortunately, yes. Tell me about it. I lived
Even
there
the fondue.
Oh my god, the fondue.
Oh yeah, look, you go and have a pizza and a beer, and you spend 20 francs, which is like $40.
Yeah.
So that's still twice more than pretty much anywhere else in Australia.
So let's call it is kind of premium. There is an entry barrier to it. So I guess...
And then there's also the exchange rate, which is, the Swiss francs have always been one of the, one of the currencies, like we call it safe currencies, where people invest and buy Swiss francs because...
It doesn't fluctuate.
It doesn't fluctuate very much and it holds its value. And so that's almost a 2-to-1 compared to the Australian dollars at the moment. So you buy something for 20 francs, it costs $40. Before GST and everything else. So all of a sudden, something at 20 francs, it's $60 before even you make any profit.
So the question is, the consumers are quite comfortable in their little niche, around Australian wines. Like, why should they explore different countries, especially, I guess, Swiss wines? Why should they be a bit more adventurous, a bit more courageous, viewing other areas?
I think that a lot of people that are true wine lovers that love wines, love the experience. And, I think something unique that has never been available before, I think would resonate with quite a lot of people that love wines and enjoy drinking wine, and especially enjoy the experience of sharing that something truly special with the people that they love. So I'm confident that that's never going to change, really. And it's not just about Switzerland, but about any other wines that are rarely seen.
For me, the greatest joy of wine is keeping an open mind and open palate. Open mouth is probably
open heart and open wallet.
Apt description. So I love exploring regions and different expressions. And while it's Merlot, it's not Merlot as we know it in Australia. It's considerably, both of these wines are considerably better than any Merlot I've had out of here. And it's a bit expensive, but if you want anything decent from Australia, when I talk to my parents, they say, well, what do we need to buy? What do we need to spend, I should say, for a wine that's made by a real person, not some dystopian automaton, press passion fruit and out it comes. And I say, well, it probably at least 35 Australian dollars. That's where something decent starts. And even then, it's probably not great shake. So, you want good Grenache, good Pinot Noir. For me, certainly Grenache is the wine that flies the flag of excitement in Australia at the moment. In any case, the point being is if we want to drink good expressions from those varieties, then we're spending upwards of $65, $80. So it's not that dissimilar. And along with that, we've got the joy of bucking convention. And we've got the joy of exploration. And
you got bragging rights on having tried Swiss wines.
We've got the joy of something potentially exciting. I mean, what's not to love? Why sit around and drink the same bloody stuff all the time? Seriously. I mean, we don't do that, but I mean, we're in the game, sort of, in various shapes and forms. But those who do, hey, it's a big world out there. It's exciting.
Exactly.
Taste the mountains.
And don't underestimate the, the power of bragging rights. That's always been,
Yeah.
I like that slogan, Taste the Mountains. Maybe Swiss wine
I
should do
know.
that.
Instead of I hate Merlot, taste the mountains.
Taste the mountains,
And
mate.
the Swiss Tourist Board can pay me for that.
We've had a good chat about Swiss wines, and now can do the kind of look ahead. How have you seen Swiss wines evolve in the last 10, 20 years, and where do you see it kind of going?
I think over the last 7 to 10 years especially, the quality has greatly improved. There's been a lot of, obviously, despite the fact that there's still a lot of artisanal growers, technology has helped, regardless. Knowledge has been shared way more. And I think that it's just going to keep getting better, to be honest.
Are there certain producers we should be looking at?
Thank you.
Well, that's pretty hard because apart the big five that produces, more than 20% of the annual production, which most of them, they're not necessarily big producers, but it's a bunch of cooperatives or smaller producers together that sort of sells under the same umbrella. So there isn't quite one producer that owns, 400 hectares or whatever of vineyards. So it's pretty hard. And I like to showcase people that I feel deserve to be showcased, and varieties that deserve to be showcased. So I don't want to bring in, 7 or 8 of Pinot Noirs from different areas because that kind of defeats a bit the purpose. So I want to try and keep the spotlight, if you want, on a few smaller, biodynamic, independent, family-run growers.
Are there certain labels, or just check out your website?
Just check out our website.
Check out the website. Awesome. Ned, what excites you most about Swiss wines?
Well, the fact that they're here is exciting, actually.
Yeah.
And we were talking earlier about a trip that I was going to go on a couple of weeks back to Burgundy, in fact, but I was then going to go to Switzerland. And I was going to help the Swiss distributor of a particular Australian wine in the market. And I had a weekend up my sleeve. So the first thing I was going to do was go back to the Valais, to go back to that town that I lived in when I was 19. I haven't been back since.
Yeah.
you
And
find it greatly changed.
I'm sure. But I would have stayed in
1979 again or something.
But I suppose it's, wine, we're talking about how important people are to articulate wine. Wine's nothing without, interesting people at its tables, not boring twats that tend to populate the world of fine wine too often for me. But people who bring it to life. The wine brings us to life, but we bring the wine, we animate the wine as much as it does. And I think with that in mind, it's exciting to have Swiss wine because from a completely selfish perspective, it strikes a chord for me, but hopefully it strikes a chord for many others. And I often think that wine, whether you've actually been to the place or not, really good wine is a bit like a liquid postcard. It transports us vicariously to places we would love to go. Because wine, when it's great, and given the price points we've just been talking about, ostensibly most of these wines are certainly premium plus quality, then a wine resonates, it talks about a place. It has a sense of place. That's what we really want at the premium level. And I think a lot of these wines do. And so for that alone, whether you've been to Switzerland or not, whether you've had an experience like I or otherwise, these wines can transport us to this place that most of us really want to go to. And it's a world of shimmering blue sky, snow and mountains, damn it. And who doesn't want to go
Taste
there?
the mountain.
And it's definitely cheaper to buy a good bottle of Swiss wines abroad than actually having to travel to Switzerland to have the same wine.
And the same goes for a lot of beautiful wines around the world. So I think most people out there want to go to Switzerland. It's a desirable looking place. Here's your vehicle. If you can't get on a plane, go with this.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun as well.
Yeah.
Okay, Dad, what's one takeaway the listeners should have about Swiss wines?
Well, not to be afraid to taste something that they never heard of, because they won't be disappointed. That's probably my primary take.
Okay, you've piqued the interest now. How can the listeners find out more about Swiss wines?
Well, just head to the website invidiawines.com, and then keep an eye out. I'll be publishing some of my stockists next week. At the moment, there should be some available in Victoria, in New South Wales, in Queensland, and very shortly South Australia and WA.
Awesome.
And considering that I got the shipment only 3 weeks ago, I think it's a pretty spectacular result personally.
Awesome.
Not that I like to toot my horn, but I'm fairly pleased.
Good. Ned, any final thoughts or messages for listeners?
No, just be drink with curiosity and
moderation.
and empathy and moderation.
Yeah,
always.
But no, that was a real pleasure, Dan. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank
pleasure.
you for coming with me.
Thank you, Dan. It's been a most enjoyable journey, I guess, vicariously visiting the world of Switzerland. Again, next time we go to get some fondue as well, some chocolates.
Yes, and I'll bring some white Merlot.
And then we'll bring the watches as well, and then we're all set.
Like a Philippa Teca or,
We'll do a watch and wine.
That's still outside my price point, unfortunately. There's a lot of things Swiss that are outside my price point, although I lived there for the most part of my youth. But anyway, that's a chat for another time.
As Dan mentioned, check out his website at invidiawines.com, INVIDIA wines.com. And that's us here at The Wind Up. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. As we say here, drink more, try more, learn more. Thanks.